Hello, I think we are live for the second ever Youda weekly LinkedIn live session. I'm really delighted to be joined by Kris from the Burnt Chef Project, the founder CEO of the Burnt Chef Project, and frankly, a bit of a hero in space. So we're going to spend the next half an hour talking about mental health, well-being, all those sorts of issues in hospitality, and a little bit on the challenges that currently in the industry, what Kris is seeing, maybe some little tips on things you could do differently to improve the support you give to your frontline team members, but also a little bit of looking ahead and what Kris thinks is coming down the pipeline in terms of the tech and future support that might be available to people working in the industry. Kris, before we jump into it, do you mind just sharing your story, like a little bit about you and how you come to set up the Burnt Chef Project?
Yeah, for sure. So thank you firstly for having me on. I think it's a great opportunity to be able to really get into the nitty-gritty of tech and the impacts that it can have on this particular sphere. But for me, the Burnt Chef project it's a complete accident. It was never meant to be what it is. So my background's in sales and marketing. I've worked in loads of different sectors running sales teams, but I fell in love with hospitality when I used to work in bars part-time. And I was also spending a lot of time I was spending a lot of time in hospitality venues when I wasn't working, and I just something about the pace of it and the creative nature of it and the diversification of individuals and businesses. It just attracted me. Anyway, I managed to find myself into a full-time sales manager role for a food wholesaler. Got to meet my first chef who manhandled me out of a kitchen because I arrived at 1 o'clock during service. And I was like, my God, this is amazing. Like, I've never, ever been spoken to like this. And there was something about it that allured me. And I learned, being a cocky salesperson, I learned that actually walking into a fine dining kitchen and trying to sell frozen grouse in the middle of April was not going to fly. So I spent a lot of time investing myself into learning everything I could do about seasons, about provenance, about use of ingredients, so that I didn't seem like an absolute, charlatan when I walked into these professional environments. So I did that for about 8 years, but during that course, I noticed that the number of my clients, my friends who were reaching the ages of sort of 30s, early 30s, they were desperate to leave. It was increasingly evident that those, especially from a chef perspective, were looking at leaving the sector. They wanted a different role. And I thought, well, this is odd. Like, you should be retiring at 70, not looking to get out at 30. At the same sort of time, I was really struggling with my mental health. I covered it up for years, and it eventually started to show itself in strange behaviors, and I was damaging personal relationships. My work was starting to suffer. My health was suffering as well. So I reached out to a private therapist at the time to go get help. And it wasn't like I woke up one day and went, oh, I'm unwell, let me go to a therapist. It took me 6 months to get to the courage. And even still, when I'm stood outside her office, I was checking around the corner to make sure that people hadn't followed me. I was terrified that my boss would find out that I went to a therapist and was damaged and broken. And I was quite fortunate within sort of 6 sessions to get a handle on it, to start to recover and start to rebuild myself. But then I started to turn my focus back to the industry again. I was like, can you imagine how many more people would stay in hospitality if we started to talk about the problems and start to address the issues? Yeah. And so I started a photography campaign back in May 2019, just to raise a little bit of conversation in Bournemouth. And everything that you see from the Burnt Chef project since then has been, this is great, but what next? What about people who work in housekeeping or maintenance or groundskeepers? What about people in Canada or Australia? What about those who can't access therapeutic services or can't pay for training? And the Burnt Chef project has just continued to, one foot in front of another, increase its portfolio of services, increase its reach to ensure that people can access therapy, that can build healthy cultures, and that this is a profession where people at the age of 30 aren't going, I'm tired, I'm broken, I can't do this anymore. But they're getting to the age of 60, 70 going, God, what a great career I've had. I've still got my marriage, I've still got my health, and now I can finally retire like other professions. So in short, yeah, five short years, but it's been one hell of a journey.
And from the outside, like just watching, your growth as an organization over the last couple of years, like one, I think there's a scary bit to it, which is like, I think the demand keeps pulling you and pulling you. Does that make sense? Like, I just think that every time you do something and do some good work, you unearth 10 more things, 10 more need points that you've got to respond to. And, the bit I think is most inspiring to everyone else is your drive to do the right thing. Like I think what's inspiring about the Burnt Chefs product for me is I think you just set out to do the right thing, to help people and to do it in the right way, and everything else follows off the back of that.
Yeah, it's a funny one. I was a data guy, right? And facts, figures, don't believe in ghosts because you have to see them. If it's on an Excel spreadsheet, I can kind of understand it. But the strange thing that's happened is that I talk a lot about intrinsic motivation. So the things that you do because they make you feel good. And I spent years making millions of pounds for other people. And it's not to say that work wasn't fulfilling, but I found my calling in life.
Yeah.
And it sounds so cliche, but seeing the loss of life in hospitality, and it's a really sobering thought, but the number of people we hear of who have taken their life in hospitality is my very reason every single day for getting up, because I don't want ever again to hear that someone has needlessly lost their life because of the fact that they're experiencing mental illness or high levels of stress or burnout. It's unnecessary. It doesn't need to be this way. So I make no bones, and I don't ever apologize. We are a rapidly growing organization. We make profit, but rather than spending that on boats and Bugattis and nice holidays, much to my family's disappointment, we are a registered non-profit. So all of that then gets pummeled back into the goal of being able to sleep at night and knowing that we won't catch everyone, but just every single day. And so the comments that we get, we had Unox recently. They carried a big commercial 140 kilo oven to the top of Ben Nevis at the weekend. And I mean, those guys put in a hell of a shift, but they passed people on that path. They were like, oh my God, this is amazing. We don't work in hospitality, but we had no idea. We're going to be telling people about the free to access services. So going back to my point is that I think people who do good things and they do it authentically and they do it honestly and transparently, the world has this really weird way of putting things in front of you and encouraging you to take those chances and to be able to keep pushing forwards. And yeah, it's been wild, but you are right. It's like holding on to the side of a runaway train. You try and put your feet on the floor to stop the thing, but you haven't got a bloody chance in hell. You just have to keep pushing.
And Kris, in your view, do you think has hospitality got a particular problem? Like, is it a particularly tough place to work or a particularly poorly managed place to work? Like, or do you think we got the same issues in hospitality that you'd expect to see in other industries as well?
Yeah, I think there are a lot of similarities. So when we talk about the problems in hospitality, I've spoken to vets, I've spoken to people in construction industry, I've spoken to, Forex and stock traders, spoken to journalists. There are a lot of issues in other sectors. Burnout and stress, high levels of stress are quite common in other sectors. I do think we have some unique challenges in our sector, whereby the rate of turnover in hospitality and the longevity of careers means that, or the short lifespan of careers means that we don't have an opportunity to develop and practice skills such as managerial skills, such as developing the right cultures, the importance of work-life balance, because as soon as you start to make progress, you find you've either been promoted into a managerial role or you leave, and that turnover exacerbates the problem because you don't have longevity within roles.
Yeah.
I also think that in order to own a business in hospitality, you don't really need to have any previous experience, and it's tough out there. Financial balancing the books within a restaurant or hotel are challenging. Your net operating profits are 2 or 3%, which means that every single thing you do has to be a demand/resource equilibrium, and that equilibrium isn't right. we're not getting it right, and that's partly in part of tax in the UK, but it's also for the fact that we haven't identified that the clear ROI is not to be made within 1 week or 2 weeks. It's the investment into individuals and healthy workplaces that will pay you dividends over the next 5-10 years. And we are very, very good. We're a great industry at being able to react quickly to things, but that's almost locked us into that quick thinking cycle rather than actually looking much more pragmatically further ahead.
Yeah, I think there is a model of behavior within this industry of like being a bit of a hero, like picking up the double shift or like jumping in or like, going the extra mile for the team to deliver that short-term result. But as you say, like long-term, it's not sustainable.
No, and it's addictive as well. Right? It's an interesting. I enjoy stress. I love it. I love feeling alive. I love the adrenaline coursing through my bones. And if I didn't know what I know about mental health and well-being now, I'd probably be a pot mess, because we fly. It's like Icarus. We fly so close to the sun because we like the warmth. We like being up high, but we completely miss when our wings start to catch fire.
If there was one bit of advice, one bit of insight you could give to managers in the industry, like what would it be?
I think first and foremost, stop taking on all the work yourself.
Yeah.
And that's not just front of house. That's not just back of house. We were chatting at a food service equipment supplier conference recently, and again, we're hearing the same things. I've got lots of work to do, so I have to work 7 days a week, 12, 13, 14 hours to get the work done. But you're locked in a cycle.
Yeah.
And I get it. Look, I'm a business owner myself. I know that sometimes you have to put in extra shifts, but I think first and foremost, lead by example. Actually put self-care into place, because if you're working at 100%, 13, 14 hours a day, your 100% is probably more like 30 to 40%. You're going to make bad mistakes, bad decisions, pessimistic outlook on things, because naturally, psychologically, that's what's going to happen to your decision making. So you're actually doing more harm than good. So I think that's the first thing. I think also understanding that your investment into people and upskilling them, there's a lot of micromanaging that happens within hospitality because of lack of emotional intelligence, lack of experience when it comes down to managerial skills. I think we need to stop micromanaging. We need to empower our teams to take more responsibility. We need to be able to handhold them, provide psychological safety, so that if they do make mistakes, you're not waiting for an opportunity to jump down their throat. You're going, okay, cool. Let's sit back. Let's look at what we can do here. Let's identify the areas of weakness, and we'll work with you to make sure that doesn't happen again or less frequently. And so those are some of the sort of key things that I would say. But there's one term that I hear continuously, which is, I'll do the extra hours because I value my team and I don't want them doing that. And that's kind of an ironic thing. It's like, do as I say, don't do as I do mentality. And I think that the sooner that we start to realize that that's causing more harm than good, and that we need to be the one to lead that, the better that that's going to start to influence others around us, really.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting. So, like, as a tech provider in the space, as you know, like one of the things we're trying to do with Youda is just give people time back. Like automate all those, frankly, pretty shitty people admin tasks that you can get a computer to do, so you can have the time back. And then there's this interesting question. I was like, okay, what are you going to do with that time? Like, is the business just going to fill it with more stuff, or are people, are people actually going to not have to work as long? Like, you look at what's capable, in coming in the next 2 years with AI, and actually you will be able to do a lot of tasks that you currently think need a human will not need a human. And I am intrigued. One, I think there's this big opportunity in hospitality to get back to what makes it magic, which is basically the human to human connection, right? That's the bit. Crafting an experience and connecting with people is the bit I think that everyone in hospitality falls in love with. And at the moment, you've got managers sat in their offices most Mondays plowing through stuff, and they haven't got the time for their team and their customers. And we can get rid of that. And the other question for me is whether you need like a big structural change. Like actually whether you get to a much healthier business if you enforce something like a 4-day week, or, you know, like you deliberately try and constrain the hours so that you don't get this creep of other stuff coming in to fill the void. Because I think at some point in the next couple of years, like companies are going to have to try and make a conscious choice about where they're going to reinvest this time. You know, like they can either reinvest it in just asking their managers to do more and more stuff, or they give it back in some way. I don't know that anyone's really got the courage to like go, well, look, let's run it on a 4-day working week, or let's pay people the same, but they work 5 hours less in the week, or whatever it might be.
Yeah, and I think that's the key thing. I think that there are going to be operators out there who go, yeah, brilliant, let's use AI, let's use technology to reduce the amount of time people spend in the business. But then they will modify the packages, the remuneration packages, which means that the individuals get paid less. And that's completely the wrong way of thinking. Because, for example, here at the Burnt Chef Project, we give sick pay. We pay sick pay because if people are unwell, they shouldn't be at work, and they shouldn't also be financially harmed because of that. We're a young business. Can we afford to do that? We can afford to be able to entrust people. We're also about to roll out for our full-time employees unlimited holiday, because again, as adults, they should be able to say, I need some time off, and not have to worry about running out a holiday in their calendar. Now, most business owners will go, well, that's a terrible idea, because you'll find that people are always off sick and they're always going to be taking holiday. But again, that shows the naivety around us creating the right culture and the right environment. The other thing that we do is we automate a lot of our processes now. So previously we had to do a lot of hand-holding when inquiries came in, etc. But we've used technology to be able to automate those. And now it's allowed some of my team members to have things like public speaking courses that we've paid for them, because it allows them to build their confidence and make their work more impactful when they're out and about. It's allowed us to be able to design and develop new training and to be able to improve our service and our portfolio of offering. And so by using technology, it's not a case of us being able to say, right, yeah, we can cut our labor costs. We can make sure that people don't have to be in the building as much. It's allowed us more to be able to empower, build confidence, improve efficiencies, and ensure that our team are trusted to be adults working in an environment that they love and that they will never leave. And so that's our goal, is that reduce that turnover, use the technology for the right reasons. Rota management. We did a piece with Plan Day recently about getting people to rota 6 weeks in advance.
Yeah.
And the response that we've had from that, people going, my God, I was spending 2-3 hours a week having to plan rotas every single week, getting them out on a Sunday for a Monday. And I've done it once, and I've done it for 3 weeks in advance. Yeah, I know it's not 6 weeks, but my team are infinitely happy, and I've just spent the same time. Now, to utilize technology then to even speed that process up even further, for teams to be able to plan their lives 6 weeks in advance, 8 months in advance, whatever it might be, and then to reduce the time on that manager to be able to then spend more time training, supporting, building the skill sets of their team. It's a no-brainer.
I think the rota is the big, like the one that people don't want to have a real look at. And I think it's the one that has the most profound effect. And particularly, you talked earlier about that transition, that usual life transition you go through in your early 30s, when you start to want different things. And I think people who work in professional managerial environments like Monday to Friday just forget how difficult it is to run your life if you don't know what days you're working in 2 weeks' time. It's like, how do you start to do the things you want to do outside of work if you haven't got that level of certainty? And we've been talking to a couple of the rota providers about how we provide them with personalized data that they could use to weight the rota. So, simple example, let's say you have a single parent, like, could you give them a higher certainty of getting the shift pattern they want than someone maybe who's a student and doesn't have like quite the same need for certainty on shift patterns and that sort of thing? Or as people transition, can you offer them the flexibility they need to live their life they want? And I think across the industry, because the talent pool is contracted, I think people have woken up to this idea, like, we're going to have to create ways of working that are more inclusive. Like, we're going to have to create shift patterns that work for different types of people and experiences that work for different types of people, because there just isn't enough of this, like, we can treat you how we want to treat you and you'll keep turning up pool of labor anymore.
Yeah, but I think we have to go through a mindset shift, and unfortunately, in hospitality, our mindset shift isn't always proactive. It's been forced upon us.
Yeah,
I mean, I remember, and I think when we sat down and first met 2 years ago, I was saying to people, you need to start looking at part-time positions within the business, maybe one job shared by 3 people.
yeah,
And the amount of people at times I got, it won't work. It won't work. You need a full-time person. They need to have the skill set, they need to get their knife skills in if they're back of house. They've got to have the experience. But then they ended up with that role not being filled. And so
yeah,
now people have started to come around to the idea that maybe it is the mother who is able to select her shifts between, I don't know, 4 and 7 in the morning in order to then leave and
yeah,
take the kids to school. Maybe it is that hospitality professional who now works in construction or retail or insurance, who actually still wants to work in hospitality and wants that flexibility, and to be able to utilize technology to be able to give them that clarity of sight and
yeah.
that access. We need to
Yeah,
start.
it's a great shame that there are people who want to work in the industry. They just can't fit the pattern. The best one I met, I went to a Five Guys once. I did a shift in a Five Guys, and alongside me on the grill was a guy he worked part-time at Five Guys, and he was a brain surgeon at the hospital in Oxford with the rest of his time. It's like, and I was like, obviously chatting to him about, why that, slightly unusual career mix, but it was because he loved being in hospitality.
Yeah.
And I think, yeah, I think if you can create that flexibility on the different types of people you can employ, one, you open up your talent pool, but also you get more interesting teams, and you get teams that can support each other. And in the States, talking to a huge QSR company, and they worked out that from a performance perspective, most of their KPIs jump if they had 2 older team members on the shift.
Mm.
Like having someone who's more experienced, perhaps a little bit calmer, cares about people, can coach people, those sorts of things, not in like formal management roles, but like it just had a huge impact on the performance of the business. I think that's one of you talked at the start about like falling in love with the diversity in hospitality, and I think you can supercharge that with better use of technology, I think.
Yeah, hugely so. And like all the conversations I have with ex-hospitality workers, I say, why'd you leave? Been divorced, never saw my family, never saw my kids. Yeah, and all you have to do is look at some of the Facebook pages for hospitality people, and they're like, can't do this anymore, burnt out, doing too many hours. Now it's staring us right in the face. Those are people who have been bitten by the hospitality bug, like the rest of us,
Yeah,
who would come back if they were given what they were given. And we need to be able to find more interesting ways. And this is why Youda's such a powerful piece of tech, is that you give that clarity of sight and that automation of processes, and like the first day on inductions, imagine turning up, but actually before you turned up, you've had all the information you need about company policy, about how to get to work, about how to be able to who your direct point of contact is, where they're going to be meeting you, the like important things you should know. And that's all done automatically, because again, it probably isn't being done currently because people don't have the time to do it. Again, that turnover period of, well, average tenure in hospitality is less than 50 days. All of a sudden, you've got people staying for more than 3 months at a time, which means they're over the 3-month hurdle,
yeah,
which means they're more likely to stay in the business for a longer period of time. Like, we need to start making sure that
yeah.
we start looking at new ways of doing things.
Yeah. Yeah, I think from like the thing that I'm quite keen to focus on at Youda is how you segment your employee base. Like, I think at the moment, no one's able to consolidate their data in a way that means they can look at, different groups or personas, if you like, within your employee base. So when you start to cut your turnover data by age or by gender or by like those sorts of things, and when you start to look at, let's say you start looking at 90-day turnover, and you can look at, what are the causal influences on that number, and I think it's often the situational stuff. You talked about the system being a bit broken, but like when you look at like 90-day turnover, and it turns out it's things like you didn't give people 2 days off in a row, or you rotated them. You still have hospitality businesses who will rotor an inexperienced new starter like third shift on a Saturday night, and then and it stresses them out and they go. Or you wrote it, you've talked a lot about the stability of teams. Like if you join an unstable team in a kitchen, it is a much harder onboarding experience than if you're joining a team that's stable and knows what they're doing and has the headspace to look after you and to bring you up to speed. So it's those identifying the data around those contextual influences on the number, I think is really interesting, and identifying which bits of your employee experience works for whom, like, and who it doesn't. Like, are you doing a better job for people who are working full time than those who are studying outside of work? And if it turns out students are having a rough time in your business and you're churning them, you can start to look at what's causing that and what you can do differently.
Yeah, I mean, shoot, that data, that level of insight is so important. I mean, our global therapy service that we've just launched for free, one of the big key drivers for us is that actually we get both personal and work issue data. It's all anonymized, so we don't know who's who, but it allows us to be able to see some of the key components that are causing people, A, to be unwell, and B, potentially to leaving workplaces in the first place. And I think that we often, a lot of the time, organizations will have some degree of data, but it might just be a pulse survey that they give out once in a while.
Yeah.
And unless they're looking
at, I think there's simple things you can do. Like, let's say you've got a pulse survey, like it's quite, with Youda, you've got an automation that follows up on that. So if on a pulse survey, an employee indicates, they might have a mental health need, they just get a bot notification saying, did you know we're part of Burnt Chef? You can click here to speak to a trained volunteer. And just those little automations, like, what I like about it is it doesn't involve another human. So you avoid some of that stigma and some of that like risk of being seen to engage with it. It's really easy to act on. You just click the button and dial through to Burnt Chef. And it's really timely. You can tell people you're part of something like the Burnt Chef when they're onboarded for the first time. They may not remember it 3 months down the line, or they may not recognize that actually they probably benefit from chatting to someone. So I do think there is a, like, those little nudges in the experience I can make a huge difference.
Yeah, and it's so, like, I mean, in terms of case studies, Buckham Brewery Liberation Group, who just won Best Pub Group at the KTs this week, actually. So well done to them for that. They've been long-term supporters of the Burnt Chef project. They put they do an affogato on their menus so that their customers, whenever they buy an affogato, donate £1 to the project. So there's that customer interaction first and foremost, like, what's the Burnt Chef project? Why do you need it? But they also promote it heavily through their induction. And one of the key reasons why people are working now for Buckham is that not only are they just promoting the Burnt Chef project internally, but they are doing all of the training. They've got the support mechanisms in place. They're living and breathing everything that we want the industry overall to be utilizing. And so I think that if you have support mechanisms, and even if it's not ours, but you've got a piece of tech that is saying, did you know that this is available? Or are you aware that we're signed up to a money charity that can help you with debt advice, etc.? And you're doing that from the very get-go. You are then speaking to the individual and unique needs of the individuals within your organization to make sure that they go, because there's such a massive opportunity right now. There are so many organizations not doing this, that if you are the one or two organizations in like 100 business area that are doing this, can you imagine the sigh of relief that new starters will get? And they'll go, I've never been treated like this before. It makes me feel uncomfortable because I'm not used to, it's too good to be true. Like, there's such a massive gap for people to do things that are going to completely, utterly change the way that their business performs just by focusing on people. It's exciting. There's an exciting opportunity, I think.
Cool. All right. Just before we finish, I'm going to give you a quick fire 3 questions. One thing businesses can do to help managers do a better job of supporting the mental health of their people.
One quick thing. Okay. I think that your managers are under a tremendous amount of stress at the moment. They are doing the best thing that they can do in terms of managing the health and well-being and the emotional health of their teams, and also trying to make sure that the profit and loss targets and all the measurements are hit. Understanding that the harder you're pushing them at the moment means that the less likely you are going to be able to get the results you deliver. So start asking your managers what you can do to support them rather than inflicting targets, etc., on them.
Awesome. One quick thing you can do, or one tip for starting to reduce the stigma around talking about mental health, accessing mental health services.
First and foremost, if you have accessed services, whether it's ours or someone else's, or you've been through therapy 5, 10 years ago, speak openly about it. Speak about how you found it, how it helped you, hopefully. Because often enough, what we tend to find is that those who speak about using services to get support for mental health issues, it encourages another 10 people to do so. And also, if there is someone that's struggling and you don't know what to say, just start a conversation. Be honest. Say, I don't know. I haven't ever experienced depression or PTSD or whatever it might be, but I'm keen to be able to help you in the best way possible, and know that we are here ready to help.
And last one thing that people can look out in themselves to look after their own mental health and well-being.
I think don't underestimate how important it is to take time off and actually to be off. We spoke, and you and I have spoken quite a lot about WhatsApp groups and being contactable on days off. Turn your phone off. Turn your phone off. The world is not going to fall to bits if someone can't contact you for half a day. Prioritize your own health and well-being. Spend some time outside. Make sure you're eating regularly, decent food. Make sure you're drinking plenty of water. Get some exercise, and do just be selfish.
Kris, thank you so much for your time. Listen, if anyone wants to find you or the Burnt Chef Project, or interested in how you can help them, where should they go?
Anywhere in London or Bristol, you'll see big billboard campaigns up at the moment.
Awesome.
You can head to our website or any of our social media channels, which is the Burnt Chef Project. And yeah, just look out for our elephants, look out for our representatives in all parts of the world, and reach out. Come have a chat with us.
Thank you very much, Kris. Thank you so much for joining us. Really helpful stuff there. I'm sure loads of people can get lots of stuff out of that. Next week, we've got Abby Dunn from the Pineapple community. We're going to be talking about how you can use people data and benchmarking in your businesses to achieve your goals and to affect change. So please join us the same time next week. Kris, one final thank you. Really appreciate you joining us. And thanks very much to everyone. See you again soon.